Let me see if I can get him in here. Adam, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh,
Can you hear
excellent.
me?
So Adam Worthington, we got you on board here. So Adam is well, I don't know all your background, but he's a graphic artist at least. I know that because he's done some phenomenal reconstruction work, taking three-dimensional representations of things that we know are tied to Joseph's actual world, such as the death mask, and also taking family members of Joseph Smith, people that we do know have kind of the genetics of Joseph, integrating everything in and doing really kind of cutting edge, the best representation that we could find of what Joseph Smith may have actually looked like. Does that kind of summarize it, Adam?
Yeah, pretty much sums it up. Um,
Tell
yeah, I
us a
guess
little
the
bit about
idea.
how you got the idea for the project in the first place. I know there's two really significant images that you've put out. What was it that started it in the first place?
So it started back in about 2015 with I think it was Joseph Smith's birthday commemoration,
Okay.
and yeah, during that time they were encouraging the youth to kind of make different art projects to commemorate it, and I decided to make a bust of Joseph Smith, and I started by reading this book here. I don't know if you can see that.
Oh yeah.
It's here we go. Joseph Smith Portraits, Search for the Prophet's Likeness
Okay.
by
Yeah.
Ephraim Hatch. And he basically wrote the book on how to recognize Joseph's likeness, I guess. Um, he goes through the book and describes how the death mask is the most reliable source we have for what he looked like. Um, Goes through pictures of his family, witness descriptions, and in the end, kind of gives his best images that he's found. And after reading that, I created a bus. Been fascinated since, and I've done probably 3 or 4 digital reconstructions each time, getting a little bit better.
Now, when you started the project, were you still at kind of the faithful TBM position in Mormonism?
When I did the bust back then, I definitely was. Went through a faith transition on my mission, and shortly after, still found out I was into church history and decided to continue on that project.
All right. Well,
Um,
I'm gonna, Bill. I don't know if you had seen Adam's images before today. Have you run across them before?
So I've seen this type of work. I don't know if this is what we're talking about in terms of being from Adam. I'm curious how he did all this because that's really cool. No, I've not seen that image before. When you look at all of the artwork that's been done, we've got a copy of the Death Mask here in our Family Pawn store here in Southern Utah, and there's so many different places to get kind of the likeness of Joseph Smith. I'm curious, Adam, as you put this together, which sources got kind of the preferential treatment of what Joseph Smith looked like. I assume like the death mask, for instance, would play a large part.
yeah, so the death mask is probably the best evidence we have. As far as other traits, we have photos of his sons that are still really useful, especially for figuring out the shape of his open eyes or his complexion, the thickness of his eyebrows. I would say that's where his sons come in the most to kind of fill in some of that DNA.
So this is the image that really has been making a splash recently, and you've titled it "Young Joseph the Glasslooker." And if, for those of you that may just be listening and not viewing the stream, what we've got is a young man seated with a white stovepipe hat on his lap that he's cradling with his left arm, and in his right arm, kind of at the square, he's holding up the familiar image of the seer stone that seems to be modeled after the one that the church has released pictures in. There's some interesting details here. He's wearing a browned kind of Regency era coat. He's got a vest on under that and kind of a blue neckerchief with the classic upturned collar that we see all the images of Joseph in. He's got some sort of bag that seems to be leather hanging around his neck, and he's facing the camera with a kind of solemn look on his face. So, can you tell us a little bit, Adam, about each of these different details? What went into it? What are we seeing here? And it's sort of an iconographic image. What went into your decision to include all these details?
So I was able to find a body of someone who was kind of in that sitting position, um, looking through pictures of daguerreotypes to find kind of that style of suit, because that would be what was in fashion at Joseph's time. And I was able to bring his arm up into that position so that he could be holding the stone and cradling his hat in his lap. As far as the face and the hair, that's pretty much all just his son's face is morphed together. And then the face shaped to match the death mask, with lighting also supplied by the shape of the death mask.
So if you go to knowbrotherjoseph.com, that's KNOW brotherjoseph.com, one word, no spaces between any of those, then you can click on some links and get to that image. And then you've included, I think, what you're alluding to, which is an image of, these are Joseph Smith's sons, or what are these other images that seem to all have contributed?
So yeah, those are the four sons that survived into adulthood. Frederick actually died shortly after that photo was taken. So we're lucky we have that photo to go off of. And then in the middle is the combined image of the four of them, with also the death mask influence.
Okay. Now, what about?
I'm just curious if I can interrupt, Jonathan. I'm just curious to come up with this image from the beginning of, like, this is the project we want to tackle. These are all the things we want to look at. This is the work that we're doing, and we finally end up with this image. What was the total time that took?
I made a really rough version of it about a year ago, and that didn't take very long. But once I decided to kind of revisit it, I would say the morphing process took just a couple hours. Blending all the details, putting the hat in the correct position, all that work, I don't know, just a few days overall, not really a few days total, but yeah.
So
over the course of a few days,
this built on the work that you did for the initial image that I want to show here in just a little bit. But what the thing that really kind of struck me is this satchel hanging around his neck, because everything else seems like conventional things that you might see in any portrait, particularly of somebody claiming to be a seer stone user. But what is the satchel? What can you tell us about that?
So the Smith family possessed, I think it's 3, maybe 4 parchments that they would use. Well, it's a little bit speculative, but at least D. Michael Quinn believes they were used in their treasure digging. And they included, they were passed down not Joseph's line, Hiram Smith's line. And they included this satchel that is basically the right size to contain the parchments if you were to fold them up. And the strap around it looks like it's about the right size to be worn around the neck. So he believes that he would use it as a sigil, as a layman, is what he called it, which would basically protect him against the evil spirits, the treasure guardians that he would have to be contending with as he dug.
Okay, this probably sounds kind of foreign to a lot of the people who may be watching the stream, and that is if you are kind of intrigued by the fact that the church has included this seer stone, you should know that that's just the tip of the iceberg of the entire magical world that existed in Joseph's day. And when we say magical world now, it kind of sounds like some sort of weird thing, but you can just think, like, when I grew up, kids used to have little colored rabbit feet that they would carry with them, and it was a good luck charm. Well, it's not too different in terms of just there being just stuff existing in the world that people participated in, but just imagine that back in the 1800s, and there were notions of spirits and demons and ways to communicate with them, and there were good spirits and bad spirits, and all of these things kind of came over with from Europe and existed in Europe, and people that have done research have been able to trace a lot of the different things here. And the parchments that he's talking about, you can get D. Michael Quinn's book. You can just Google the Hiram Smith Holiness to the Lord parchment, and you can see some really dingy old photographs of those parchments. I have been working and trying to track down, there's one guy who has apparently high resolution color photos of those parchments that he took a long time ago, but has never allowed those photos to be digitized. D. Michael Quinn talks about visiting with the patriarch, back in the 1970s when he first started doing his research. And the patriarch was like, "Hey, do you want to see the Smith family relics?" And he's like, what are you talking about? And the guy starts pulling this stuff out. And this is the first that D. Michael Quinn had ever kind of been exposed to the magical aspect of the Smith family. And he didn't realize what he was actually seeing. And in the interview, he talks about how he's trying to get them to come back and talk about something else. He didn't realize the importance of what he was seeing. And now we're still trying to chase down good images of those parchments because they are so fascinating. So, Bill, if anyone comes into your pawn shop with photos of that parchment, I will pay a pretty dollar for that. If anyone's watching,
It's interesting, Jonathan. We've got iron banded jasper stones in our pawn shop that we sell as seer stones, essentially. And Joseph got his first seer stone in 1819, 1 year before the first vision. And he got this egg-shaped seer stone that you were seeing in that picture. Mm-hmm. He got that, I believe, in 1822 while digging a well with Willard Chase or for Willard Chase on their property. And man, when you understand the history of Mormonism, treasure digging, scrying, Spanish silver mines, guardian spirits on hills protecting treasures, and the use of seer stones is a large part of the Smith family life in those early years.
Yeah. Well, that's there's a couple of things that really get you hooked into Mormon history when you dive into them, and the magical aspect of it for me was one that was really exciting. So, Adam, I've put up on the image now your first rendition. Kind of, this is the first piece of work that brought you to my attention that you released, and this one I can't display it here, but you included a bunch of other images about how you did like a 3D scan of the death mask and did a projection of some of the details from his son's face over it to try to really come up with a professional rendition of what Joseph might have actually looked like. Was this one kind of a tougher task to perform than the other one, since you'd already done this one by the time you started the other one?
So this one was a little bit of a different process. I had done morphs in the past of his sons and kind of found that David Hiram Smith resembled kind of the morph of the four the closest. He seems to be a pretty good representation of all four of the sons. Mm-hmm. And so I was able to find a picture of him sitting at that 45-degree angle. Thought that would be a good way to kind of convey his profile as well as his face straight on, get a little bit of a mix.
Yeah.
And also found online somebody had done a 3D scan of the mask and was able to use that to pose it in modeling software, light it in the same direction that the original photo was taken. And by putting that over his face, kind of like a mask, using his eyes and a few of the details that the mask leaves out, that's how I produced that image.
Okay, yeah, I see. If you go to the nobrotherjoseph.com website, you can see you've done a brilliant job of really showing kind of your work process, the different source images that you took for the clothing, for the death mask, for the profile, from every bit of detail that we have at the time in order to create what you have. Now, I messaged you a few months ago, I don't know if you remember, when you released that image, because I thought, that's nice, but it's not complete. And so what I did is I took your image and I brought it into that face app where you can change someone's expression and change their age. And I gave him a smile, and then I chipped his tooth because you did hide his teeth with the pose here. But there's a story in Joseph's history where a mob has pulled him out of the Johnson home in like 1832 or something like that, and are trying to get him to drink poison. And they've got like a spoon or something that they're trying to jab the poison down his mouth, and they chip his tooth. And so for the rest of his life, he kind of talked, he had a little bit of a whistle maybe when he talked. And if he smiled, you would see a chipped tooth there. Right. So I showed you that image. I'm like, I made a meme. I was like, this is great. It actually includes some history, but you refused to let me show it. I was
Well,
hurt.
you could show it if you want. I preferred to keep it kind of true to the death mask, which already has a little bit of a natural smile. And the tooth is interesting. I felt like the picture itself had a little bit of dignity to it, and the smile with the chipped tooth sort of, I don't know, brings that down a notch.
All right. Well, okay, audience, for the next few minutes, I want you to remember the dignity that you just saw in that picture, because I'm going to show you the image now. And this is just, I mean, it's historically accurate, but it's not dignified. Okay, so here we go. I'm not laughing. I'm remembering with dignity. This is the image that I made. I was all ready to share it, but Adam put the kibosh on it, and I respected him for that. I appreciate you letting me show it now. So this was at a period of time where I was taking a lot of the wives of Joseph Smith. We have older pictures of them, bringing them into the Face app, and then using the artificial intelligence de-aging so that we could see what the wives looked like at the age that Joseph married them. And then you released this image. I'm like, well, let me try that. So I gave him a smile and then gave him a little bit of a chipped tooth. And so it's so fascinating when you consider the history of Joseph, his character, and all of the remarkable things that he did, particularly in the Nauvoo period, where, we remember him as the prophet. He was the prophet, the president, the mayor, the guy who you had to go to if you wanted to buy land. He had the general store. There was just so many things that he did, but he was human, just like anyone else. And he had a chipped tooth. He walked with a limp. It was just really fascinating. So this is that particular image. I won't release it anywhere else. This is where you can see it. This just gives you that detail. Again, it's nobrotherjoseph.com, and we'll close that down. All right.
I'm curious, Adam, your thoughts on, were any of his children, did anybody in the community in Nauvoo or elsewhere, did any of the members of the church, having seen all of Joseph's children, point to any one of them having a closer resemblance than the others?
In reading the book on the topic, they have a lot of witness descriptions, people that knew him in real life. And as far as I remember, they didn't really mention any of his sons or their likeness to him. So it's kind of just my supposition, based off of the morph of the four of them, that David probably resembled him the closest. But yeah, I couldn't say for sure.
All right. Well, thank you for coming and sharing a little bit of your work, Adam. I know that it's early in the morning where you are, and you probably have to go. If people want to see more of your work on both the reconstruction of Joseph Smith and other things, where can they go?
So yeah, nobrotherjoseph.com. That's the main page, and yeah, that's
all right.
Pretty much it.
Well, if you bring anything out, or if you want to showcase anything in the future, please let me know. I'd love to have you on again.
I'd love to. Appreciate it.
All right. Take care, Adam.
Great work.